we are thrilled to be joined by U.S. national team legend, European pro soccer player, Mo Edu. Mo, how's it going, man?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Appreciate you having me on. How are you?
And
Everything
is
good?
is is it okay to call you Mo? I know you're a professional soccer analyst now, being advertised as Maurice, but a lot of national team fans know you as Mo. Which do you prefer these days?
I prefer Mo. I mean, if you call me Maurice, I feel like you're my mom or something like that, and I'm in trouble. So the preference is Mo. If you call me Maurice, then it kind of catches me off guard, and I kind of sit up straight a little bit. So we can go with Mo for sure.
So we had your broadcast partner Keith Costigan on last weekend, and he was great. Like it seems like you guys go back a while and have known each other. How is that partnership going, and how's the new Apple TV deal going?
Oh, I absolutely hate it. I hate working with Keith. He's so Keith is my guy. Yeah, we'd actually do go back a decent amount of time. When I retired back in 2018 and I started getting into this space, um, there wasn't like a consistent partner that I was working with. I was being rotated in with different people, but the one person that I ended up working with quite a bit was Keith. So we got to know each other really well, built a good kind of chemistry, um, and then just had a I don't know, scattered amount of gains over the past few years. But it's someone that I've always been, good friends with. So it worked out well that he's the one that I ended up being partnered with, and I hope it comes across the way that we intended to come across, where it's very serious in terms of trying to break down the game in the right way, but then also at the same time enjoying the moment, right? Being at the game and living every action, every play in real time, and trying to convey not only our thoughts but our personalities and how we enjoy a game and how we break down a game. Hopefully that comes across on the airways.
Yeah, last week Keith actually joined us from his car driving home from calling Austin's CCL game. And so he was a champ for doing that. But then we got to listen to you guys on Austin's game this last weekend against RSL. And I really enjoyed it. Thought you guys did a great job. So happy to have you guys on the call again this week. Um, Looking forward to the Houston Dynamo. So the history between Austin and Houston. Austin, it looks like Austin's won four of the five total matchups between these two games. Houston generally has a home field advantage with the heat. And like I know that sounds crazy coming from Austin, but even going from Austin to Houston, the humidity is something that is actually like a difference maker going from here to there. But it's going to be in the 50s this weekend, so that advantage is kind of out the door this weekend. And looking at Houston this season so far, they've lost their first two games by a combined score of 5-1. And then we're off this last weekend, so they'll be well rested going into this one. But how do you see Houston this year? Like, what are your expectations for them? How have you seen what they've done so far?
Well, I think in a weird way, right? Because you start off a season and normally you want to play games back to back to back. You want to get into a rhythm and you want to build from performance to performance. But as you just said, the way they start off this season, with some change, first and foremost, you bring in a new manager that initially takes some time for him to kind of establish how he wants his team to play and um, instill the culture and all of his ideas. But with that, like I was mentioning before, and you just said, when you lose your first two games, the break kind of comes at a good time for them. Give them a chance to kind of recalibrate, get things back in order, have a chance to maybe get their legs back under them, have a chance for the manager to go ahead and instill again the thoughts that he had in preseason, what he wants, what his expectations are from this team, what he wants to see from this team, what he wants them to look like. Um, a chance to kind of get that back in order. And then the fact that it's a home match, you were talking about the weather conditions, that's out the window, but it's still a home match. So they'll need to lean into that, try to build off the energy of the crowd. And it's a Texas derby, right? So that all obviously just instilled its own levels of motivation for both sides.
Yeah, so they did bring in some reinforcements in the off season, but most of those guys are not able to play yet, either waiting on immigration status updates or recovering from injuries. And so the team that they've actually fielded the last couple of games is not super different from what they were running out at the end of last year, which got them, I think, second to last in the West or last in the West. I can't remember exactly, but not great. Um, I remember last year, I think it might have been Hector Herrera's second game playing with the team. He came on the field at halftime in Austin, and the team got worse. I was sitting there watching that game thinking like, okay, like Coco Carrasquilla, one of their other midfielders, a player like, I really like watching him play. He's a really good player. And he was doing some dangerous things. And I was thinking like, okay, they're going to bring on Hector Herrera and Carrasquilla might be able to do something against us. And then they ended up subbing Herrera for Carrasquilla and took off their most dangerous threat and put on a guy who just ended up not doing anything. I know a lot of people have said like this season for Houston will not entirely, but partially depend on, is Herrera bought in? Is he going to actually affect this team this season? Um, I know I don't know how much you've gotten to see them this year. Like, do you think he's doing that yet, or do you think he will be able to do that for them this year?
I think he has to. I definitely agree that he has to be a big player for them to have success. I mean, we know the pedigree that he has. It's just about him finding how he best can use his qualities to make this team better. It's an interesting midfield trio that they have, though. Himself, Carrasquilla, and who's the other one? Artur, right? There are
Yeah.
three players that I look at it and I think are very similar in terms of how they play. I think Carrasquilla will be the one that plays a little bit more advanced, and him and Artur will be the ones sitting deeper and trying to dictate the flow and link passes. But to me, they're three players that are very, very similar. So trying to figure out that balance as to how you get the best out of them. In some ways, I think you play two out of the three and you bring in another attacking midfielder. You let those two play as either a double six or a 6 and an 8, and then you have an attacking midfielder who's in front of whoever those two players are. Someone who's more of a goal threat, someone who's always forward
Yeah.
thinking, someone who's going to take chances in the final third and be that creative player. So as much as I'm saying a lot of it will be put on the shoulders of Herrera, I think part of that comes from, again, his profile, his pedigree, his experience. They need all that to come to the forefront. But I'll be curious to see how long that trio continues to play together, and if it ends up meshing well and producing what they're hoping will be the outcome.
Yeah, it's a tough puzzle for them to solve because it looks like, in what little I've seen, just highlights and a few clips, it looks like they are playing Artur and Herrera deeper in almost like a double pivot look. And then Carrasquilla is almost like a 10 in a 4-2-3-1, which I think
Yeah.
a lot of what Carrasquilla did last year that was so dangerous was starting deeper and turning and using like dynamism to drive forward and kind of carry the ball forward and progress the ball. And if he's playing a little farther forward, I could see how maybe it's less effective in that way. And so it'll be interesting to see how they solve that puzzle. And then if it's not working with those three, who do you drop? Because like those three guys, you would think any of the three of them could start for a lot of MLS teams. And so yeah, it's a complicated thing for
And
them to
that might
figure
be the
out.
problem. That might be the issue in itself, right? Because as you just said, all three of them are players that you can, and most teams you could plug in and they'd be a starter. And so that might be part of the reason why you're seeing all three of them play it. The other part is as you kick things off, you're talking about some of the players not being available as of yet. And that might be another reason why you're seeing the three of them playing together. But I just look at them and, you know, without being disrespectful, I see duplicates. I see a similar player who brings a similar skill set. If you play Artur and Herrera deep, I think you're going to get a similar kind of output as if you played Carrasquilla and one of the other two deeper. I think the one thing that I will say about Carrasquilla, and that's probably why he's playing a little bit more advanced, is I see him as being the more kind of 8 if you're playing a 4-2-3-1 and you're playing with two deeper. I see him as being the one that has a little bit more freedom to get forward. But again, I think I agree with you. I think he's best when he's starting from deeper. When you see him play for Panama, more times than not, it's usually as like a number 8, where he can be the one who's breaking forward, getting into the box late, linking play, but having that ability to start from a deeper position. So real quickly, I remember in my playing days, there was on very few occasions when I had to play a little bit more advanced as like a number 10 per se. And it's just a different ask, right? When you're playing deeper, you're receiving the ball more times than not, and there's so much of the field in front of you. You can play it into your number 10, get it again. Whereas when you're that more advanced one, sometimes you're playing with your back to goal. You're playing on a half turn is how you usually should be playing. But just the ask and the responsibility, the requirements, how we will evaluate you from the media side of things is a completely different. And in some ways, it might be unfair to the player because we might see him, he's playing at number 10. Well, if he's not creating goals, he's not scoring goals, my criticism is going to be a lot harsher. Whereas if he's playing at number 8 and doing the things that he's doing from that number 10 position, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking at Austin, I'm not sure how much of Austin you've gotten to see this year, but they've been playing two young midfielders together in almost a double pivot with Danny Pereira and Owen Wolf. Owen, we'll talk about this in the other segment on the show, but Owen, I think, had a breakout game against RSL. He's had moments, but in that game, I thought he just played a really complete game, top to bottom. What have you seen from that midfield and from Austin FC? And like, what do you think they need to do against Houston to come away with 3 points this weekend?
What do you want me to start? You want me to start with Owen, or you want me to start with the midfield in general?
Yeah, the midfield in general. Yeah,
I actually like the balance. It's two young players. I think obviously Owen Wolf stole the headlines in that game when me and Keith were talking about it actually, and he asked me on the spot like who I thought was man of the match. It was really close. It was a really close decision for me. I actually leaned towards John Gallagher, but it was honestly it was a coin toss between him and Owen Wolf. I think. And then off air, when we were just continuing just having conversations about what that game was like and players that stood out, of course, Owen stole most of our conversation. And the way that I described it, because I think a lot of people will say, when you talk about a young player, for lack of better description, people will always say like, oh, he didn't look out of place. And I think that that's doing him a disservice. I
yeah,
thought he bossed the midfield, right? I don't, if so, to me, it wasn't him not looking out of place and he just fit in. No, I think he
he's
bossed the
good.
midfield.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's of course the goal is a quality goal, and there's so many small details on that goal that make it a beautiful goal. I thought the build up to the play first and foremost, but then there's just even small things that he did that sometimes go unnoticed, and they're so subtle, but they go a long way. So before he receives that ball, he has to look over his shoulder, and it's such a small detail, but you look over your shoulder and now you see that there's space there. He receives that ball in a half turn and he's off to the races, right? If he never has that look, he might have just received that ball with his back to goal, played it safe, and then looked to get it back, right? So small details, but I thought that the midfield they looked like they had a clear understanding of what the game plan was, first and foremost. I thought they worked well collectively. I thought they had a good balance between the two of them. They had a good hunger for the game, a good appetite. They won challenges, they won duels, and they made the plays that they needed to make. So what I mean by that is when they needed to advance forward, or when his goal, right? That's a play he needs to make because that's what the game was dictating. Other times, maybe it's you just receiving that ball and playing it into a Driussi who's in that spot, and he's doing that. But they did what the game needed and asked for. So for young players, especially, I think that's incredibly important, and it goes a long way for your confidence. But I thought they looked good. I thought collectively, the whole team, they managed the game well. Um, I thought it was a poor goal to concede on the corner kick. Didn't do a good job of closing down Andrew Brody before he serves the ball in, and then the scramble in the box. I think you got to win your individual duels, but the response is always key. And with all the storylines coming into the game, the disappointment in midweek, the rotation of players, the game against St. Louis, I thought probably could have gone either way. Unfortunate the goals that they conceded. So having all that in your mind to have the performance to come on the road and play against Salt Lake, which is not an easy place to play, get the results you did. And again, I thought that they managed the game really well in the second half. They weren't as, I would say, expansive, but I thought they were calculated when they did open up. They knew that they just had to manage that game and be smart in the way that they took their chances. They were calculated when they took risk, and ultimately, I thought that they deserved the 3 points.
So another player who I thought played really well in this game was Danny Pereira. The last couple of years, this is his third season as a pro. It's always been very clear that his ability to carry the ball has been I think early on above average, and I think at this point in MLS is elite. Like his ability to just like carry the ball past a line and make the defense start to scramble. Where he's lacked, I think, the last couple of seasons, especially last year, as he was playing a lot as a lone six and didn't really have that partner next to him, was defensively being able to cover ground and win balls the way that you need to in that position. He's getting a little help from Owen dropping back next to him and having some support there, but Danny Pereira looks like he's embraced the role of a defensive midfielder. I know you played in that part of the field a lot. Like, what is that strictly a mentality thing, or is it a combination of mentality and physicality of being able to not just be an offensive threat, but to cover that ground defensively and be an asset defensively to your team as well?
It's a little bit of all that, to be honest with you. I think it starts first with just having a good understanding of how your team wants to play, right? If you're playing as a single number six compared to if you're playing in a dual six or dual eight, it's a lot. The responsibility and the ask is different. So when he's playing now and he has Owen Wolf next to him, they're playing off one another. So there's going to be moments when Danny has a chance to advance forward, and that means Owen has to be more disciplined. And there's going to be opportunities and vice versa, where they have to just be a good double pivot, read the game well, be connected, be communicating a lot. I think what you're seeing though is an evolution, right? As you play more games, as you get more seasoned, as you have the chance to apply new things, you're taking on more information from your coaches, you're looking at tape, you're watching yourself back. I think that's a key thing for young players, and there's a lot more emphasis on it now, is to really watch yourself, right? Like you'll get feedback from your coaches, and sometimes you just go and try to apply that directly, but when you see it physically, when you walk off the pitch, you have a feeling of what you played, of how you played and what that looked like. But it's not always accurate. It's not always accurate how you feel compared to what it looks like. So when you actually go back and look and watch yourself play, which I'm sure he's done numerous times, you can see now what the coach is saying and how you can change as a player, how you can improve as a player. So to your question directly, I think everything that you mentioned from a mentality standpoint, you have to be bought in. You have to recognize that if your team's going to be successful and you're playing in that part of the pitch, which I think is the most important, I might be biased, who knows? I think that's the most important part of the pitch. You can dictate the tempo of the game. You can set the tone of the game. You have a lot of responsibility. And I think he's embracing that now. He's recognizing how he can steer this team in the right direction. And part of that starts to evolve into you becoming more of a leader. And that leadership shows through your play.
Oh, well, thanks so much for that insight. I wish I could sit here and talk to you and ask you questions like that for another hour, but we have a lot to cover on this show with two games this week, including a really wild CCL match with a lot of interesting storylines connected to it. So
Yeah.
I'll just ask you, do you have any other final thoughts on this Houston Austin matchup this weekend?
I mean, for both sides, I think it's a big game. I think from Austin's standpoint, it'll be coming off the back of another CCL game, right? So it's about, we saw the reaction and the response that they got after losing in midweek. Now you're hoping that the result is different this time around, and so it's about building momentum, right? You've had a couple positive results now in the league. And to be fair, like I said, the game against St. Louis, I don't think that they played horrible. It's just a couple mistakes that turned that game around for them. So you want to get, I know it's still early in the season, but if you can build momentum and start clicking and everyone being bought in and on the same page, I think that goes a long way. I'm hoping for Jossie to get his first goal relatively soon, because I'm excited to see what that partnership of himself and Driussi can look like. You know, this is a guy who's a proven goal scorer in this league, sitting on 97 career goals. And then Driussi, we saw what he brings to this team, to this league. If you're a neutral fan, you just fell in love with watching this guy play. And obviously, if you're an Austin fan, you're trying to get him signed up for a 20-year deal, right? Because he's class. And so I'm excited to see what that partnership looks like when they have some more game time together. They start to learn each other's tendencies a little bit more, and they get on the same page, because I think that can be really, really, really fruitful for this Austin team.
I okay, I know I said I was gonna let you go, but that's you brought up a point I wanted to ask you about. So I've seen a lot of or heard a lot of people say that like those two aren't being on the same page. Do you think they are on different pages? Like did you see misconnections happening, or do you think it's just a product of how Austin is playing that those two aren't necessarily going to link up that much?
No, there's just, I mean, there's certain moments, where, for example, there's a moment like in transition. I think part of that though is also, and I don't think we mentioned it even enough probably on the broadcast, the influence of like playing at altitude. And so in these dying minutes and you're in a transition moment, sometimes you can't get on the end of a pass, or you're looking for the ball in a certain position and it's played in a different position, right? And so that's where I'm saying that as they start to learn each other's tendencies a little bit more, because there's certain things that when you play with the player 2 years, 3 years, or maybe just even a season, you just start to you do things without even thinking about them. I receive the ball and I know, okay, Jossie's making that run. I can play it blindly.
Yeah.
Or Jossie knows, okay, he's going to receive the ball right here on the half turn. I know to make this run, or I know to drop deep. He wants to make a run in behind. Just small little things that, as a number 10, as a striker, are important because you hope that they're connecting consistently and often. So that's why I say just over the course of a season, these are two players that I trust, that I've had in a small spell, in a small sample size. Driussi, he's shown that he can be quality in this league. And then Jossie, over a larger amount of time in this league, has shown that he's a proven goal scorer. So it's just a matter of just getting them just more game time. I think that's all it is, more game time. You have a manager in Josh Wolf who worked with Jossie, so he knows him as a player. I don't think he would have brought him to this club if he didn't think that he would fit in well and gel with the players around him first and foremost, but then also the system, and have the quality to be able to add to this group as well.
Yeah, they're both really high IQ players, so you'd think they will be able to figure it out at some point. Well, yeah, thanks so much for all that insight, Mo. I really appreciate it. You and Keith did a great job. Y'all be on the call for MLS Season Pass on Apple TV this coming Saturday. Once again, I think there's like some certain kind of insight that a former player is able to give on a broadcast, but not all former players are able to give it eloquently on a broadcast. And I think you do a great job of that. So I really appreciate your work. And yeah, thanks for doing it.
No, I appreciate that, man. I appreciate you having me on, and look forward to the next one.
All right. Thanks, Mo.
It's like that's what I'm saying. I hope Jossie gets his first one, gets a couple of in that game, and then that goes a
Yeah,
long way.
man, I think Jossie's actually been playing fairly well. I
I
think
agree.
this
I
is
agree.
Jossie's whole career, right? Like people don't understand the things that he does well that don't necessarily end up in goals, and they say like, "Oh, he's not very good. He's not playing well." It's actually, I think he's doing great. Like it's like,
One of the things, and you can, you can clip this and use it in the on the on the podcast if you want. One of the things that is such an underrated quality of Jossie is his willingness to do the dirty work, right? And that's on both sides of the ball that I'm talking about. To make the runs for plays that look like they're dead. I think you described both of them really well when you said they have a good soccer IQ, because I think people really sleep on how clever Jossie is, with his timing, with the runs that he makes, with the timing of the run that he makes, because that opens up so much more for, if you're number 10, if you're a winger, it opens up opportunities for you to play balls into him, but then it also opens up space for you to attack, And I agree with you. When I said that I hope that they get on the same page, look, that starts to gel more. It wasn't a knock to either of them, because I think that I agree with you. I think Jossie's been playing well, and I'm fully confident the goals are going to come. But I just think when that marriage, right, when
yeah,
right now they're still they're dating right now, they're flirting with each other, and it's looking good. But when that marriage actually happens, I think this can be a dynamic duo in this league.
yeah. There's Maxi Ruti has come on and been good in his sub minutes, and there's a lot of Austin fans who are saying like, "Oh, Maxi should start. Maxi should start." And it's like,
Yeah.
y'all aren't paying attention, man. Like, Jossie's doing well. It's gonna come. Like the goals are gonna come.
Yeah. No, I get, it's hard to, of course, you hear that argument because he's coming on and scoring a goal. And it's like, that's how
Yeah,
people assess and judge
yeah,
strikers, especially if you're not watching the game through the same lens that we're watching it, right? Where you're appreciative of the small details, of the things that are happening that aren't being shown on the actual screen. Like if you're in the stadium and you see certain things that the screen at home is showing you this, they're showing you the ball plus this, right? The game is, well, you can't even see it, but the game is
yeah.
that, right? And so there's certain things that he's doing that they can't appreciate because they're not seeing it. But no, I agree with you. I think the goal that he scored, who was it against? And they called it back for offside. Thought he took that really well.
Yeah, against Montreal, I
So
think.
yeah. So I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about it.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll let you go. I've kept you long enough. Thanks a lot, Mo.
No worries, man. Appreciate it.